All right, our next panel that we're going to start is it a buyer's market? A few years ago, when we started this 5 years ago, it was clearly a seller's market, and then we've had years in which we said, well, it's somewhere in between, and then now the question is, where are we now with the market? So if I could have the next panel go ahead and make their way on stage. And back by popular demand, our Greek goddess. I'm never going to let that go, by the way. It's awesome.
I've been called worse things.
Is there still time to get you in the governor's race, by the way? Because you know what? Can we draft him, Senator Jeff Brandes, into the governor's race? People are trying to draft me into crap, so. All right, so there you go. All right, who else we were missing here? Make sure you sit. Where's Garrett? The best looking guy's coming last. Where is he? My goodness, he's making a grand entrance. Well, he is a native, so he's on Ybor City time. Just like your grandfather, right? Just a few minutes late. All right, wouldn't be the same without you. All right, joining us for this panel is Ashley Waite Woodcock. If you don't know Ashley, then there's something wrong because she's replaced Ron Weaver as the ubiquitous one. That's a big Princeton word, Josh. Ubiquitous means she's everywhere, it seems to be. So my good friend, she's here, and she's with Marketing and Business Development with AWS Title Services. We have David Moyer, Vice President of Smith & Associates Real Estate. The late Garrett Greco, not late as in dead, but you're here. Sorry I said that. Greco Realty, and again, Senator Jeff Brandes is with us as well. We appreciate having you guys here as well. All right, let's start with the headline, which is this a buyer's market, a seller's market, something more complicated? With an honest answer for someone in this room thinking about buying in Tampa Bay today, what would you say? And we'll start with Ashley at the end.
Statistically, it is, right?
Is?
A buyer's market.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, statistically, it is a buyer's market, but depending on the area, depending on sellers and buyers and where they want to live and where people are moving or why the sale is happening, it all matters.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's a stable market. We had 6.5 months of supply into December, and now we're down to about 3.5 months. So we're moving inventory. Days on market are longer. The average price is actually a little higher than last year, but the median price is flat. So I think what Jeff mentioned earlier, the luxury market is driving the prices. The luxury market is probably what's moving the market. Those are the homes that are likely selling a little faster. And then real estate is always niche, right? So Pinellas County has average days on the market of 120 days, and they have more inventory. And so I think what comes down to is every market, every neighborhood is different. Some areas are super tight. Some areas there's more inventory. So, off the cusp of the hurricane, likely the West Shore area had more opportunities, a little bit more price drops, and with Davis Island, it recovered quicker. So every area has its own internal niche. And then the great homes sell fast. There's buyers out there. There's no reason, why buyers chose to buy in February than they did in December. I think it's simply they were hoping pricing would drop. Pricing hasn't dropped dramatically. There may be some price adjustments in certain neighborhoods as well. But all in all, I think it's a much deeper question. Days on market being longer would assume that buyers have more opportunity, more leverage, but at the same time, the prices haven't significantly reduced. So with that, it's a complicated question.
Yeah. Well, Garrett, as somebody who is investing, you probably have an idea of what kind of market it is.
Well, it's certainly a buyer's market. I just don't think sellers know that.
That's a great answer.
We had a strong run up 5 years ago, and a lot of sellers today are still caught in that world. The properties that are sitting are overpriced. They might be unkept, and they're really not market ready. And so I think that discrepancy from reality and where sellers are at is sort of leading to longer days on market. But I agree, in the upper end, waterfront property, beachfront property, premium property, property priced correctly, property ready to go to that new buyer, usually changes hands pretty quickly.
Wait, I'm sorry, my now 11-year-old just FaceTimed me, so. Hi, there she is. Aren't you at camp? I paid money for you to be at camp. I'm kind of in the middle of something here. Oh, she just wanted to say hi. She wanted to say hi.
My job. Can I tell you what job I
No, you can't tell. She's at BizTown. We're busy here. I gotta go. I'll call you later. All right, we'll go to Dairy Queen. Okay. When I say that I'm as real as they come, that's just beautiful. Thank you so much. I knew that was going to happen today. I'm sorry, Jeff.
Well, so I kind of come back to some questions here. Like, one, is the asset the home or is the asset the mortgage that most people have right now? Right? Think about this. If you bought in 2000, 2001, like, are you trapped in the home or are you trapped in the mortgage? And I think that's an interesting question that that a lot of people are facing right now. Like, I can't afford to move because I can't replace this with with a 3% mortgage. I'm going to replace it with a 6.5% mortgage. It's also one of the unique times in history where you can actually buy a new home cheaper than you can buy an existing home on the marketplace, because the Hortons and the Lennars of the world are offering crazy incentives on like 3-2-1 mortgages and all kinds of other things to get you in that house. And so for a lot of buyers, they're in this interesting place where, to your point, these people aren't, if you kind of look at what Home Depot and Lowe's have said, is like, there is a ton of deferred maintenance on a lot of these houses. People just aren't making that investment into their home. And so when they're putting their house on the market, they're putting their house on the market that needs $50,000 worth of work done to it. And people just aren't willing to do that, and they aren't willing to do that. And so we have a lot of people in this market that are rage quitting, right? They're listing, they're leaving it out there for 6 months, they're getting pissed off because it isn't selling, and then they pull it off the market, and then what? And so they're like, okay, so that's happening. A lot of people are holding on to their 3% mortgages and moving, and then renting that house out. So I think, can we talk a little bit about that? You guys are much more experts in this stuff than I am, but like, this is what I'm seeing, and what concerns me is that those things are going on.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true. They coined it the Great Freeze, right? Like, what would make me move? I bought this house for a 2.9% interest rate. I have a house. I know I need more square footage or more room. Do I evaluate buying something? If I buy something, it's more expensive, obviously, from a carrying cost, from an insurance, from a mortgage. And therefore, do I, perform an addition and go through that process? And who knows how expensive that becomes? But I think that's part of it, right? But the fact of it is the inventory has depressed from where it was and what's kind of coined that buyer's market. But absolutely, I think sellers have to be prepared to have, the home as perfect condition as possible, because, the insurance company, and when you do the inspections, they have to qualify. They have to have a newer roof. They have to have the crawl space. They have the electrical and plumbing. So I think it's simply, yes, I think the buyers have much more leverage than even probably 2019. The inventory just isn't there. So when there is a home that's ready and able that a buyer can participate in, they're able to do that. You're right. What are those owners doing that have opted not to sell that probably should sell? It's a great question that, we don't have the answers. They may be just forfeiting the opportunity of buying and living through it because they've done it for 10, 15, 5, 7, whatever amount of years.
I think it's important to also note that people do still have to sell and buy. Somebody passes away, because I'm a magnet for probate files, because I used to be a probate paralegal. People that are relocating for jobs, people that go through a divorce, so they're forced to sell. So, if you're a realtor out there and you need sellers and buyers, go after divorce attorneys and elder law estate planning attorneys, because they have clients who have to buy and sell.
There's a tip.
Yep. I mean, and then there has been more transactions. So, as much as there's been more transactions in Q1, there's been more pending contracts in Q1. That's both Hillsborough and Pinellas County. I don't know the exact reason what sparks that. As maybe it's just the seasonality of it. But I think people have been. I think 2025 was pretty flat, and there could only go in a upward direction from there.
So, I'm going to let Senator answer the next question, just as and this again is kind of going back to this amendment because we really don't know. There's an awful lot of unknowns and unintended consequences whenever you do something of this magnitude in Tallahassee. But I know that early on when this discussion of property tax elimination reform, the governor started this discussion. I know as I spoke to different, around town in different realty groups and what have you, there was a lot of excitement because, again, trying to figure out what will spark the market that has been somewhat flat in certain market sectors. And I understand that. But then I've seen certain economists, and maybe it would have been a good question for Ryan if he could have spoken to this. But do we really know? Because does it really spark the market, or do home prices rise?
Well,
what do you think is going to happen?
There's a provision in this constitutional amendment that actually is a huge disincentive for people moving here, which is the 5-year provision, which is probably unconstitutional. It's probably unconstitutional. Probably will get thrown out. But it creates a disincentive. It basically creates second-class Floridians. So if you establish residency in 2026, then you're kind of grandfathered in. But anyone who establishes residency after December 31st of 2026 has to wait 5 years to get the full benefits of this constitutional amendment. Courts have traditionally thrown that out. I'm not sure what they were smoking in Tallahassee, medical or not, to put this in. But ultimately, for some reason, they decided to put this piece that is likely unconstitutional into this legislation. But it is a huge disincentive. I think it will hurt jobs moving here. I think it will hurt business recruitment to come in here. The Constitution doesn't allow you to create second-class citizens. We don't have probationary Floridians. Even if you homestead in Florida, you are homesteaded the day that you declare that your homestead is Florida. Now, you don't get the benefits of the discount till the following year, but you're homesteaded the day that you're here. This creates a different standard, whereas you can homestead that year, but you don't get the full tax benefits for 5 years. And that's generally considered unconstitutional.
I'm curious how many out-of-state residents follow the news closely to even know that that is going to affect them. There's a lot of residents in Florida that we educate about the homestead. They don't even know, and they've lived here their whole lives. So I'm curious to see.
This is the great thing. Bob gets to explain to all of them this over the next few years, because they're going to call his office raging because, hey, I thought my tax bill was going to be X. They passed this. That's why I moved to Florida. And then they call him up, and he's going to be like, sorry, whoops. And that's an uncomfortable conversation to have. And that's where this is all headed. But I don't think it actually gets there. I think the courts throw all this out. But it doesn't make the math better for cities either, right? And that's the problem, is if they are granted the full exemption when they first come here, then there could be this additional incentive to move to Florida if this were to pass.
And we're not sure the residency requirement saying that if you were a, quote, resident before December 31st of 2026, how we actually figure that out.
It's a nightmare for you all. It's a nightmare. Like, nobody knows. The revenue estimating conference came out on Friday, and they were like, they gave you all the clarity of a shrug emoji. They don't know.
I think unintended.
Did the revenue estimate committee conference actually say that?
Yeah, it was.
They gave the shrug?
They said, we don't know. They said, figure it out.
Awesome.
We don't know.
The unintended consequences, and I can't speak for the governor's office, but I think the rationale.
You can.
Here you can.
The
Come on,
rationale was that was going to help slow the problem with the transportation issue. I think that was the intention of why do we need another parameter in place, such as a 5-year probationary period.
It's red meat. It's just spoiled red meat.
Well, the good part, when the governor buys a house after he's out of office, then he'll be grandfathered in. He's living in government housing now, so good for him. Get me out of this, Garrett. So you have a unique perch as an investor. You obviously have skin in the game, what you're trying to do. Every major developer is shaping the region, and it has been on your podcast, and then me. So So what's the gap between what developers are saying publicly and what they're actually worried about privately? Are there concerns out there? Some have been touched on with the previous panel, as well as some of the things you've touched on here. But where do you see the real opportunity, and what's getting your attention?
Well, developers are enthusiastic about this market, and I think we all should be. Our saving grace really is that we're in one of the most insulated markets in the country. Really, no matter what happens nationally or internationally, there's a lot of news out there, we're probably always going to see that buyer demand, which props up our market. So developers generally are enthusiastic. There's out-of-state developers and developers from around the state that want to get into this market. That keeps driving the demand. So publicly, they're enthusiastic, right? They're trying to sell their product or get businesses to move into their projects. I think behind the scenes, what they tell me is they're concerned about a couple things. One of them is housing, workforce and affordable housing. The people that move into these projects, or really the people that work at the small businesses and the other businesses that put leases into these projects, they need a place to live. And if the city is unaffordable, that's going to kind of screw up what their plans are to build these projects. Also, transportation. We need dedicated funding sources for public transportation, or we're never going to be able to build a dense city and provide that housing. So those are the big concerns. The other one really is the city's permitting process. That's talked about all over the state. I think Naples implemented some sort of a software where they can actually use AI to fast track permits and review and stuff like that. Private developers and real estate businesses want the city to be proactive in implementing those technologies.
Awesome. So David, let's talk a little bit about, and it's been mentioned before, and the senator spoke to it as well, that the luxury market has remained strong, and that's where a lot of your focus has been with the Pendry residences, One Tampa, Aqua in the West Shore district. But I'm curious, and the question was written for me, but I'm curious personally, who the hell is buying this stuff? Because I grew up in a town in which either the people that had money, and otherwise the luxury market was when the first round draft choice came to town and bought a nice house or built a new house. So who's buying them? What's the demographic, and what's who's driving this luxury market?
Sure. Sometimes I wish I knew what they did for a living. But reality-wise is the buyers who buy into these developments are generally local, very familiar with the location, have probably raised a family here in a single-family home, and are looking for a maintenance-free living. They've built up 20, 30 years of equity in their single-family home. They can live there while the projects are under construction, and then they can move in and they can sell their home, and their homes are usually very attractive. That speaks for Bayshore. That speaks for downtown Tampa. Downtown Tampa is an urban core. So those homes would usually in 2004 to 2008 be small square footage, built for young professionals. But in 2004 and 2008, buyers only needed a 5% deposit to buy. Now all of the buyers in these developments require a minimum 30% deposit for these developments. So it requires somebody with that type of equity. There was a CNBC video with a related group who's out of Miami, and international buyers don't buy in Tampa. They just do not. They're not familiar with Tampa Bay. They don't come to Tampa Bay. They fly to Miami. 70% of those developments are bought by international money. So Tampa is unlike that. And so when we see projects under construction right now, like Pendry or One Tampa, for instance, they're kind of reaching that topping out process. That's when the parents of the UT students, right? Their kids come to UT, they go to USF, they love the area, the kids stay there, and they're like, oh, we need to move closer to them. And they still remain, their homes in the Midwest or in the Northeast, and they visit them. But the early adopters are generally people who live here and know the market. The secondary buyers that come later in the life cycle of our sales are generally people from out of state who have some familiarity with Tampa. They don't just pick Tampa for a dot on the map, oh, this is a great idea. They're usually my kids are here, I have friends in Sarasota, but I don't want to be in Sarasota. Those are the consumers who generally buy. I don't know what they do for a living, but they generally do pretty well.
Well, my son's going to the University of Tampa next year, and I'm staying in Wellswood, and I'll be driving an Uber to pay for it. So I don't know. That's not.
A lot of the buyers that we see, primarily, I don't have the statistics of every state they come from, but it's the Northeast.
So, I think it's great that we get this cross-section of folks, and sometimes people will say, well, why would we have a title person up here other than the fact that we love you to death? But really, from the title and closing side, because that's part of this discussion, what does the path from contract to close actually look like right now? What should buyers do differently today to protect their deal and get to the finish line?
Well, I will say, as a title agent and a paralegal, title company, title agents, real estate attorneys, we're the glue that holds the whole transaction together. So we're working with listing agents, buyers, agents, sellers, buyers, survey companies, property casualty insurance, municipal lien search companies, everything. We have to keep track of everything. So we see every side and every perspective that goes into the closing. Obviously, the big thing right now is the fraud, right? Wire fraud, AI, what we can put into place to protect buyers. I do think that, yes, fraud is real, yes, fraud exists, but a lot of the fear that consumers have is not actually the reality of how the fraud takes place. So I think it's important to educate everybody in the process of what exactly happens. It's not, okay, we're going to send a wire, we're missing the digit, it's going to somebody else's account. That's not what's happening. Emails are getting hacked. The fraudsters pretend to be the title company. They copy the signature block. They change the font letter from an A, like circle stick, to the opposite A font letter, so it looks identical. A buyer gets the email, hey, we're the title company, send your final cash to close to this account. They don't verify it. It's not the actual title company. They don't call to check with anybody. That's the money that's getting stolen, essentially. So yes, fraud is real. Yes, we need to protect everybody, but a lot of the fear that the consumers have is not actually real in how it's taking place. So I just am a huge proponent on education and educating people along the way on how things really work.
Very good. So for all the panelists, we can kind of go through and then we'll open up for questions. So looking ahead, 12 to 18 months or beyond, what do you think the outlook for the residential market is? And what's one piece of advice for someone in the room, whether they're in the market, a real estate professional or somebody that's seriously thinking about buying them next year, what would be that piece of advice? And we can start with you and come back down this way. Tampa's
awesome. Like Garrett said, everyone wants to come to Tampa. The cliche term, we live where people vacation, and it's true. I'm an optimist, but I'm also a realist, and yes, I actually asked our underwriter to pull our numbers just so I had the statistics. But from year to year, we went down a little bit, but still touching 900 plus policies. A little bit down from year to year, but we stay steady, we stay busy, people are moving, buying, and selling, so I'm excited.
Yeah, I think what Ryan shared was, real estate thrives on consistency, and it's been super inconsistent over probably the last 8-12 months, and there's no predictions if it's going to be consistent or not. It seems like the market's somewhat stable. There's a lot of variable factors, but buying real estate's never been about making money for someone who's actually living in a home, right? You have your family, you have your kids, you have you wake up, you have no kids, you buy a house, next thing you know, you're married, you got 2 kids, you got 2 dogs, you need bigger space. So it's all about your lifestyle. Your life is.
You forgot the mother-in-law.
Mother-in-law. I got the mother-in-law. Mother-in-law. I have the accessory structure.
That's what
so
happened to me.
I'm okay there. But it's really about a lifestyle, and honestly, that's the driving force, right? It's your occupation. Do you move for work? Do you need to be closer for work? How much time you have in a day? Convenience, and all of those things need to be a bigger driver and a decision maker than simply, is today the best time to buy? Obviously, money is largely important, but your home, your life, your convenience needs to sometimes take ownership or take over that aspect of the decision making.
Being a place where people want to be and live and do business and visit is always a place that insulates you from bad times. And America right now is going through a transition where people are not choosing to necessarily live in the suburbs. They really want to be in an urban environment with many amenities, much like this area we're in now, Ybor City. And there's so much to come in our city, in our urban core. Look around at the opportunity, right? All of those empty parcels of land, most of them have plans. There's a lot of parking lots in our urban core that have opportunity. And here in our Latin district, there's amazing growth happening. Even this building is undergoing a $2 million renovation. This place is like a cathedral. This is an institution. This building is irreplaceable. There's so many things in Tampa that really can't be found anywhere else in Florida. And I think naturally, when people from the West Coast, from the Northeast, and internationally visit Florida, they're going to eventually come across Tampa and they're going to go, wow, this is something unique and incredible. And I think that fact alone will always keep me optimistic.
I'm amazed how many buildings like this we've lost over the years that, when we didn't have the foresight. You'll see pictures of things and go, gosh, why the heck did we tear that down?
We had, I think, 200 plus cigar factories in the city. Today we have 24 or so left.
Yeah.
I think it's a K-shaped economy. I think the wealthy, as we've heard about, are doing just fine. I think the middle is consistently getting squeezed by higher interest rates, by lack of product to buy that they can afford without having to spend a lot of money in rehab. And I don't think there's any real product at the bottom end. And this is why people consistently rent longer, because there is no other options. I do think you're right. I think people want to live on campus, right? And they want all the amenities of a campus lifestyle. But if they actually want to buy, they're going to get in their car and they're going to start driving and figure out how far they got to drive in order to do that. And that creates a variety of other problems, including transportation problems. I think we have to be intentional about focusing on the bottom end of the market. I think we need to talk. If I was advising the elected officials of Hillsborough County and Tampa, I would say focus on smaller lot sizes, because traditionally your lot cost was 20% of the home value. That is creeping up to 30, 35, 40% right now of the property values, and that math doesn't work anymore for lower income housing or starter homes. I think you've got to do so. It would be lot sizes, lot splits, right? We can't take 45 minutes of a city council meeting or a county commissioner to split one lot. That doesn't scale, but that's what we do today. You have to allow for upzoning, which is traditional single-family homes. I can make a duplex or a quad look just like a traditional single-family home and house 4 families instead of 1. And then we talked about accessory dwelling units. And if you want to see where this is playing out in a negative way because we didn't do this, go look post-Helene what happened to Shore Acres in St. Petersburg. So those were the modest price homes. The modest price for being close to downtown, those were homes that were $600,000 to $800,000. Helene comes through, destroys most of that product. Those homeowners could not replace that product because they would have to build up in order to replace it. But because the city wasn't proactive, those homeowners ended up having to sell those lots. Well, what did we replace that $600,000 to $800,000 product with? A single-family home that is now costing $1.4 to $1.8 million. We lost a whole area of affordability because we weren't proactively thinking about the problem. And this is going to happen at scale everywhere unless we address these things. So before you saw my, this is, I'm here kind of up today under my name is the insurance company that I'm chairman of. But the Florida Policy Project is kind of my passion project. I will tell you I'm a policy addict and I use my nonprofit as methadone to kind of cure my addiction. But one of the areas that we look at, we just focus on what works today. What are the nationwide best practices and how do we bring those best practices to Florida? We're not the only place that is dealing with affordable housing issues and housing issues in general. Other states have dealt with them. What works, how do we bring those here are the things that we focus in on. And the things that you really have to do, there's only so many solutions to this problem. We have to have this conversation about general density. It has to be in every conversation that we have because, as you've heard, I think it's absolutely a K-shaped economy. Your buyers that are wealthy are going to find a place to live. The people that are struggling are the people working at the hospital that are cleaning the rooms and are in the cafeteria, and your small business owners. Those are the ones that are really, really at risk here. And if we don't solve that problem, over time, Tampa looks very different.
Well, you guys have done incredibly well because we have 10 minutes left for questions, so I have a couple of them here. In the luxury market, $1+ million and up, have the numbers in the first quarter been overinflated due to high-end condos that had a pre-sell for 2 years, then released them first quarter?
It's a little, yes. So the average sales price is likely inflated due to luxury home sales. I think that was referenced, right? The average sale has ticked upward. The median price has stayed flat. Now, as far as inventory in Q1 Hillsborough, really no new closings of luxury development. Obviously, maybe Ritz Tampa, probably their kind of tail end or beginning. But that generally wouldn't have spiked. We're talking, not a significant inventory for the global dynamics. Now, if we were talking Pinellas County, quarter 4, quarter 1 specifically had probably 400, 500 units go through a closing process that could have inflated it. But mainly Hillsborough, I don't think that there was a substantial luxury inventory closing process that would have really skewed for Hillsborough County specifically, if that makes sense. But I do 100% think the luxury market is what's driving the average sales price up, and it's exactly what Jeff is referencing, right? Is that those homes that were $800,000 are now 1.5, and it was probably similar in West Shore. A lot for $1 million is now a $2 million, and those are what's driving, I think, those sales prices upward. I think the homes that, as you drive forward and you go through the Heights and you move into these next neighborhoods, those are the homes that are probably selling pretty flat. And then as you continue to trend forward and forward and forward, where large-scale developments of the Lennar type caliber are likely dropping, slashing, incentivizing because they have a much more larger inventory database. And it's not even north, it's west, it's south, it's Riverview, it's Palmetto, and I'm not the county guy, but the further you get away, the more likely those prices on the bottom are super more competitive. It might not be exactly where the buyers want to be, and they just kind of pick one on the map because they all kind of look the same. I got to drive a car to go somewhere anyway, so it's just whatever house is available and who's going to give me the best deal.
Yeah, interestingly, a lot of those developments down south, people that bought a couple years ago have lost value versus what they're paying.
That would be right. So I think us in this market are kind of in this general sphere, but I would say pricing has probably decreased in a lot of anything that's probably 30 minutes out that might not be as established.
I'm getting more calls nowadays asking if we're handling short sales. So
I think people are using, real estate is always niche, it's always local. So when you use ChatGPT, when you get a headline, Tampa Bay might speak to other areas of Tampa Bay. So it's really regional, it's really zip code. I mean, when I talk about condos, since 2008, we've only delivered 38 condos in downtown Tampa. That's the only amount of inventory that's actually been built and delivered in downtown Tampa. So when we talk about Pendry and One Tampa, those are the next, right? That's another 200 plus. But over a course of 10, almost 15 years now, that's all of the supply from a condominium development in downtown core. And when you compare that to Miami or any other large market or even likewise market, that's incredible how little that is.
Let me move on to the next question, and this one has Gen Z in it, so I only see one Gen Z. Are you? I don't. Garrett, are you Gen? What?
I think I'm a millennial, but
I don't even know. I know genuflect because I was a Catholic school kid, but I'm not sure what I am. So again, what changes? And this is kind of because it says will be done. That's assuming that some changes will be done. The Senator's shaking his head because we understand the political reality at the county commission and city council. But again, speak to some of the things that should be done.
It's going to be through policy,
okay.
Right? It's going to be, it's been talked about, for example, not having corporations being able to purchase single-family homes. That's legislation that should have been passed a long, long time ago. I had a listing maybe 6 years ago, Blackstone bought, I've dealt with it. So you can't blame the seller for taking a high price, but through legislation, you can stop that corporation from buying single-family homes. Other policies, Jeff, you mentioned about, right, smaller lot sizes, increasing density, especially within the urban core. Those things produce more supply. More supply equals a lower price level. The challenge we had years ago was with COVID, you had so much demand here and not the right policy through legislation, but also just the general supply to keep up. And so all the people that moved here essentially took homes. Like from me, when I bought a home a couple years ago, I was competing with a ton of other people that weren't from here, right? And so my property tax bill is extremely high, and I know there's property tax reform coming up.
Is Nancy still here? It's not our fault.
We'll see how that plays out. I think it's dangerous as it reads, but there certainly should be some sort of relief. The homestead exemption has been $50,000 for how long? At least a couple decades, right? Something like that. Prices have escalated so much in the last 20 years, they could double the homestead exemption and it wouldn't cause that much panic and you would at least give some relief. I think a more reasonable solution is there. But also more general policy regarding loans. Maybe there should be, right, there's the Federal Housing Administration. Through that, there could be policy that could give a first-time home buyer even more of an ability to purchase a home. I mean, Gen Z, the first thing I thought when I bought my home 2 years ago was, what the hell is my son going to pay when he's my age and he wants to start a family in Tampa? What is a home going to cost in 25, 30 years from now? So I think it's through policy.
It's not going to matter. You're going to leave him so much money that he can buy anything he wants.
God willing, I'm working on it.
We hit this one really quickly. So, and again, we're talking about Redfin. So, and it kind of speaks to what we said before. Is this anecdotal or just, they throw a headline out there that foreclosures are higher than they've been in whatever number of years? But maybe just quickly touch on this one. Does this suggest that?
I mean, I think this is the rage quitting we've talking about, right? People are delisting. They're not getting their price. Listen, it's the price, it's the price, it's the price. Like if you want to know why homes aren't selling, it's because you're asking too much for them. And they have to come down and you aren't willing to get them to bring them down. And that's why people say, well, I can't get my price, but I still have to move. I'm going to rent it. And so that's why you're going to see more and more single family homes come on the rental market. But let's go back and talk about a question you didn't ask, but I think it's important. The condo market, not the new condo market, but the older condo market is a hot mess. And this is a huge problem throughout the state of Florida where people think, oh, I'm buying a condo, I'm buying a rectangle in the sky. No. You are buying into a corporation that you have no visibility into how it's handled, how it's managed, and it's probably run by people who are not CPAs, right? And this is a huge challenge that we are now discovering altogether because the state used to allow you to defer your maintenance expenses, your reserves. And with a simple vote of the majority, you could defer your structural reserves. Well, post-Surfside, the state came out and said, no more. You can't defer this stuff. In fact, we want to see more information on this. So I think you're going to see some major reforms. The cure for the condo market is transparency. And that transparency does not quite yet exist right now. So I've started a new company. It's a nonprofit called the Florida Community Certification Association, where we're actually able to go in and look at condo associations and provide kind of a good housekeeping seal of approval, if you will, and begin to grade and rate condo associations. We've done 10 condos so far in the Tampa Bay market as our first pilot. We'll within the next 2 months, we'll be able to begin to roll out that publicly and begin to take new condos on. But we think that that is a portion of the solution because right now, what happens, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, like right now, like 14 days before you close on a condo, you get a 600-page, PDF file handed to the 60-year-old widow, and it's like, this is the disclosures. It's all in here. Good luck. And they're like, well, this is one of one. I've never seen a condo set of disclosures before, so they have no clue what to look like. So they're leaning on their realtor, trusting them to discern for them. It creates huge liability on the real estate professional side. There's some real liability on everybody's side, but ultimately that home buyer gets in there, that condo buyer gets in there, and then they find out, oh my gosh, we're facing a $35,000, $40,000, $200,000 assessment, right? One of the cheapest condos right now in Tampa Bay is probably Bayshore Towers in downtown St. Pete. And those 5 years ago, 7 years ago, $1 million, $2 million, you can buy in there now for like 400, 500, 600. Why? Because there is a question mark around the assessment. Is it 500,000? Is it $1 million? Nobody knows.
That's why education is so important for everybody. Everybody in the business, realtors, brokers, sellers, buyers, consumers, whoever. Everybody relies on the trusted professional to know what they're doing. And as a title agent who holds the glue together, I see people day in and day out who have no clue what they're doing. And I'm not trying to be ugly or mean, but that's the reality of the situation. And so sellers and buyers are trusting these licensed professionals. So again, whether it's legislature, policy, whatever, people need to have more education. They need to have more hours of training. They need to have an apprenticeship so that when they are guiding the sellers and buyers of what they're doing, they're properly informed. A lot of the short sales are happening, or a lot of the condos are being sold because they were hit with a huge assessment that they can't afford to make, and then they're out of their property. So, yeah, it's a mess.
So, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm telling buyers to not even consider some of those older products. Florida had a condo boom in the 1970s. Look, buildings are very expensive to retrofit. A lot of them have structural issues. A lot of them are coastal. They have saltwater intrusion. You could get a $300,000 condo, and the HOA fee and the condo fee is like $2,000 a month. I fear that Florida has so much of that condo product with an aging population, those units are barely even marketable. I mean, I don't think that there's really even enough buyers out there to consume all that supply. I don't know what happens to all these condos we have in Florida that were built in that era.
Well, I mean, if you take the cue from Miami, developers would be able to potentially acquire them. I mean, I think that's probably the next step if these properties are deemed uninhabitable, that, a developer, usually these condos are on the beach or, somewhere like you're just referencing downtown St. Pete. Obviously very expensive undertaking, but you could see somebody, acquiring all the condos through some sort of contractual agreement and redeveloping it. But
Really quick, we're going to have
long
to wrap
story.
it up, unfortunately, yeah.
No, that's what happens, right? So they go in, they buy 60% of the units, and even if it says, hey, you can't convert unless it's 80%, the condo rules say, well, you can change the condo rules at 60%, and so they go in, change the condo rules, and then force everybody else out, and then turn them into apartments, and then put the money back in, and then reconvert them back to condos down the road. So this is the tried and true formula for, but you can kind of see the New York buzzards circling over a lot of these developments.
The New York buzzards. Do we have any New York buzzards in the crowd? It's very short from buzzard to bastard, so I'm sorry, but we're gonna have to cut this. You guys are fantastic. Thank you so much. We'll go ahead and tee up our next panel. So thank you. Again, thank you to our sponsors, Valley, Smith Associates, Florida West Coast Credit Union, GBH, Playbook Public Relations, CBRE, and Stewart. Just real quick, and I wish we had been able to get to this question. It really, again, speaks to, I think, the key on this whole property tax issue going forward is, okay, if this is not the right solution, and I can tell you that I literally had legislators tell me, I have to, that's an interesting word, I have to vote for this on the floor, but I'll vote against it at the ballot box. So there's a lot of them that know this may not be the best solution, but then, if the issue's the future, what happens right now? And I think that ultimately is going to be the decision. How do we, the folks, as the senator has spoken to, that are being squeezed, and that have to make a decision based on, helping themselves personally versus what the long-term effects will be. I wish we'd have gotten to this question. Maybe we'll touch on it later on, but it's a really, really good question. And again, we're going to try to go back and answer as many of these and put them on the website as we can.